I want to get this next session going. This is about podcasting. It's about music. It's about aural delights and about creators shaping the soundscape. So sound is back. Podcasting is back. Music and audio drive engagement. Sound effects are getting better and better. Video and podcasting becoming super important. And there are all these new ways to be creative and monetize. So that's what we're going to talk about. We got a power panel right here, hosted by Drew Baldwin, who's the CEO of Tubefilter. Our panelists, Rox Codes, the founder of Flightcast, a super cool video podcasting app you got to check out. Oscar Höglund, the co-founder and CEO of Epidemic Sound. They basically are the soundtrack for the internet and YouTube. And Jonathan Faulkner, EVP of Digital at iHeartMedia, who is bringing podcasters to the world, whether it's via traditional or digital or new ways. So I'm not going to say anything more. Drew, bring him on up. The stage is yours. Give him a big round of applause, please.
Hey, thank you. Since this is about audio, we're all being muted colors. We don't need to let our voices be exciting. I just noticed we're all like very muted. My name is Drew Baldwin. I am the founder and CEO of Tubefilter. We write about the industry. We've been doing it for 20 years, the creator economy. We also have a big award show called the Streamy Awards. And very, very excited. We do have a podcast. It's called Creator Upload, which I, for the first time in 17 years, was allowed to actually co-host on it. I was a pinch hitter. But my partner, Joshua Cohen and Lauren Schnipper, are both really great hosts. Subscribe and like it. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to try to accomplish today in this panel. So let me just pull up my notes because I think this is good. Just to reiterate so everyone knows, we're going to explore how creators are using podcasts, music, and other audio formats to build deeper audience relationships, unlock new revenue streams, and experiment with storytelling outside the visual realm. From licensing to discovery, from community building to creative control, this conversation will dig into both the opportunities and the growing pains of the sound-driven creator economy. So we're going to do a fast-paced, honest conversation where we're going to talk about what's working, needs to be fixed, in the audio-first content. So this idea of audio-first content is more than just podcasts. And I want to ask Jonathan, if you don't mind just kicking it off, what is audio-first content and how wide is that landscape? You're iHeartMedia. Your company's been from the beginning, so tell me a little bit about what does that mean in the creator economy? It's not just podcasts.
It's not just podcasts, right? You go back to radio as a whole, storytelling as a whole, that is how we started with our language was in audio. And so really at the end of the day, it's about storytelling, connecting with others, being able to get information out as quickly as you can, and through multiple channels. Now, we do talk a little bit about video at the end of that or a visual element at the end of that, but it all starts with audio. And so I think for us, it's just how do we get information out there faster and being able to tell the story that each of our companies or individuals are trying to tell. And you can do it very, very quickly with audio.
Yeah. So, we have podcasts, we have traditional music and radio, we have a way to enhance video with audio. But I think there's been a real explosion in podcasts and in audio first content. And I want to know, why is that? Aren't we supposed to be moving forward in technology? Shouldn't it be like 3D, 4D, virtual? Why is something that's one dimensional, which is audio, gaining so much traction now? I think Oscar.
Yeah. So, I can offer up 3 thoughts around that.
Yeah.
I think the first one has to do with the complementary nature of audio first. I think a lot of other mediums demand 100% of your attention, especially if there's a video component to it. And I think that space is becoming quite saturated and it's a much tougher sort of area to conquer. However, the complementary side of things, when you're doing laundry, you're in transition, you're heading into the car and you can bring audio along and you can do something in parallel. I think that's a super interesting place where there's a lot of innovation happening. So I think that's part of it, the sheer nature of audio. The second thing I think is happening is that you could maybe see all of this as a counter reaction to the platforms. Many moons ago, when content creation really started to take off, it was all about following. You got followers. Iteration number 2, it sort of flipped over to the algos and suddenly you couldn't follow your classical storytellers. And I think like audio in general, maybe podcasting in particular, is the customers fighting back saying, no, we really do appreciate following individual stories like in a long period of time. So it's like a counter movement to the whole algo way of serving content. So I think that's the second reason why we're seeing podcasting, because it's such a great sequential way to consume content. And then maybe I think the third one is like audio is becoming more important because contrary to common belief, like content is getting longer and consumption windows are expanding. So tracks are longer, books are longer, binge watching, like everything is longer. And as things get longer, you need more music to get emotion, get people excited, and pull them into the content.
Well,
three.
That's interesting because also you think that everything's getting shorter. I mean, like there's all this investment, by the platforms in short form content. TikTok was a leader there. And then you have YouTube with shorts and, during the TikTok uncertainty moment, all of those platforms were doubling down on their shorts, their shorts in investment. So it's interesting to see that there's a counter reaction to that sort of binge eating of content with something that's a little bit more substantial, right? And we talk about the contract that a viewer has with the creator, right? Basically, it's a contract. You're like, okay, I'm going to invest my time and energy in this thing right now. Is it going to be worth my time or is it not? And with shorts, it's easy because it's a low commitment, right? You're going to just see this thing, and if you don't like it, you're going to scroll out. And next thing you know, you spent 2 hours eating like the whole bag of chips, kind of, so to speak. But with podcasting and audio, it's a different sort of lift because you can also do other things at the same time. You can exercise, like you said, you can exercise, you can do laundry, you can be driving somewhere, right? And so that's how it sucks you in but then you also spend another 2 hours or all your waking hours if you're like me and you're just listening to everything all the time. But, it seems more substantial and it's better to get to that long appeal. I mean, as a creator, what is appealing about audio first content versus video production first or video first?
I think the big thing you end up seeing is audio has a bit easier time being really long. Like I think in general, it's a little harder to make a 2-hour YouTube video than it is to consume a 2-hour podcast on Spotify. And what that's kind of resulted in is a lot more trust from that audience. And that trust results in oftentimes a lot higher capability to monetize. If a podcaster recommends a product, they usually garner a way higher, CPM, how much money they make on 1,000 listens, because the likelihood of that converting is way higher because you've listened to this person talk for hours and hours and hours and hours because it's easier to consume. And then as a result, they have more trust in you. They have more faith in what you say.
That's true. I mean, we've seen the rise of watch time as an important metric. I mean, YouTube also has now completely redefined what a view is. It's when a video loads is now considered a view. That's part of the sort of vanity metric and sort of universalizing what a view is across multiple platforms. But on the back end, the real view, the engaged view, it comes down to watch time, and that's where you're really going to get the engagement that you need to monetize, right? If people are just loading videos and floating through, it's not really doing anything for the bottom line for both the creator and for the platform. But when you have longer engagement, that's where you can, those sort of, first of all, you have space for advertising to find its roots, but also there's a different type of level of engagement when it's more intimate with that longer form content. I mean, let's talk about, intimacy and the type of relationship that a audience has with a creator when it's audio first. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Jonathan, a little bit about like that sort of intimacy and why that's important?
Yeah, I think it's a completely different environment when you're listening and you are listening to your favorite podcast or radio host, whoever it may be. It's a friend that is sitting next to you, someone that you are investing time with and you trust them. That's one of the biggest things we find in audio is there is this built-in trust, because you know everything about that talent in most cases. And so I think that translates a little bit differently than watching or consuming something in video form where you're someone that is in a way viewing from afar versus having a conversation with that person next to you.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like you're watching something like when it's a big production, you're watching it.
Yes.
But when you're listening to a conversation, you're much more part of it.
Intimate.
It's more intimate. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that, Oscar. Yeah, that's what you want to say.
So, I completely agree with Jonathan. I just complement that with the audio side of things, because one part is the audio as it relates to voice and the conversation that people are having. But I think the music and the sound effects merits some discussion as well, because we like to think about video without audio is a bit like food without taste or flavor, right?
Yeah.
So if you just consume dead calories and there's no flavor to it, it's literally that. It's like dumb carbs. But if you add umami, if you add taste, suddenly it becomes memorable, and if you get it right, it becomes unforgettable. And so the analogy here is, I think that ultimately storytellers are about one thing. It's about evoking emotion. And it so happens that music is the language of emotion.
Yeah,
and
totally.
so I think that when you pair music with an intimate story, immediately you trigger a different kind of response. People lean into their seats. You get engaged. You tap into a sentiment, because I think it's ultimately telling a story is trying to convey a feeling. Like, there's often a theme there. And it just so happens that music sits at the very top part of the stack in terms of tools in order to create emotion. So starting off with music, setting a tone, getting that right, then leaning into a discussion or a conversation that's primed around that same sense and the feeling, you get this reinforcement learning loop that you're taught, this is how I should be engaging, this is going to be scary, or this is going to be fun, or this is going to be resourceful. And then so you build on top of that. So I think layering conversation, music, sound effects to drive people into the content, I think that's a huge part of it. And the longer the content is, the more important that is, because it's difficult to fall in love with content. It's easy to fall out of content, but you need to use all these different kinds of tools to get the engagement going for a long period of time.
I think even expanding on that too, when you think about the feeling and the emotion, that plays very well into advertisements as well. So being able to monetize that. And what I mean by that is, when you are listening to something, you are creating an environment in your brain that is easier for you to remember. I always say, if you were to think about a radio ad right now and it talks about you're sitting at home, your mother's bringing over and setting food on the table, you have a view of your childhood, of your dinner table, of those that are around you. Mm-hmm. When you consume via video, that's all created for you.
Yeah, true.
So you can remember it better if you actually have that in your brain, of your own visualization of that, and you can connect much faster.
It just feels like it's healthier for you, right? You're not just being told everything, right? So, now, like, I can't imagine Harry Potter other than the Warner Brothers interpretation of it. Like, prior, reading the books, yes, I had my own Harry Potter, but that was supplanted, and so now, it's like I said, it doesn't have the same kind of meaning. Okay. I want to transition the conversation a little bit into some of the more, contentious issues around audio. Some of them have to do with, let's talk about, like, everyone has a podcast now, including Tubefilter, subscribe, creator, upload. But, saturation and discovery. Like, what are the tension points here in terms of, discovering new music, new audio first content? Is it algorithm driven? Is it more subscriber driven? Is it word of mouth? Like, how are we discovering audio first content, and what needs to be fixed or what can be better about it?
Yeah.
Sure.
So there's this huge movement towards video podcasting now that seems to mostly be coming from the fact that audio is really hard to discover. If you think of Spotify, when is the last time you found a new podcast on Spotify? It kind of doesn't happen.
You just, like, hear about it somewhere and then you search it?
Right.
Yeah.
Like some other location. So a lot of podcast marketing is regular marketing. A YouTube video doesn't get marketed. It gets fed through an algorithm, right? So there's sort of this overall understanding of, like, what is algorithmic content and how does that drive your strategy versus what is content that has to be discovered, in a hole somewhere where they have to type your name into a search bar specifically, right? Like, virality doesn't really exist as much in a audio podcast. But
there's no shorts or, like, short form audio content.
Right, but
you're not
long.
You're not, like, scrolling audially through short clips of sounds and clips, right? I mean, other than news, perhaps, right? So then, so it's the nature of the medium that makes it harder to get algorithmized.
I would say that's my take. Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, one of the things we've seen is we launch a lot of new podcasts at iHeartMedia, and the biggest thing for us is, how do we take a show and make sure that we get it out to as many people as possible? So we've taken some podcasts that did not have a marketing plan for it. One example is they were getting about 300,000 downloads a month. Not bad. Brought them over into our platform, put them on the radio, announced in any radio station that audience would make sense for that podcast. And within 1 month, they grew to 1 million downloads a month. So it's about really, like you said, it's how do you market the podcast to the right audience to drive listenership to it on any platform.
Yeah. And so that's like the nice thing about YouTube, and the nice thing that's been pushing YouTube for so many years is YouTube algorithm does that part for you. YouTube finds the audience for you, brings them to you. So then your responsibility as a creator is just, how do I make the best thing and package it well so it's clear what it is?
So do you have to do video if you're doing a podcast now in order to make it?
Definitely not. But I think it can make some things easier. It also makes a lot of things harder.
Yeah. So, I mean, does that change sort of the nature of how you're going to be doing audio podcasts if video has to be part of your marketing?
At the very least, I think you mentioned shorts, even just taking clips of the podcast to put on shorts. I mean, that is how I discover some podcasts as well, is through shorts. Not that I'm sitting there watching the shorts over and over, but it's what drives me to be like, oh, I want to see that interview of that person. And I click and listen.
And then you subscribe to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that also if you add video to your podcast, I think that allows for multiple ways of your content to be found. Because going back to, like, I remember a time when you would recommend music to friends, specifically as if album was the default way to consume content. I think that playlisting and the change in the consumption pattern sort of allowed for different kind of marketing. So you less recommend music, and that was more taken over by the algos and the platforms. I think the same is true in video, going back to sort of where we started with sort of followers and then being algorithmically driven. And so both video and music now have fallen into a much more platform-centric, algorithm-centric way of getting recommended, whereas podcasting is, at least in my world, way more word of mouth oriented, because that's where you get the intimacy.
Yeah.
So everything I follow is somebody who's told me, this is great, you're really going to like this. And so if you both have the audio component and the video component, you can play both sides of the field, because the video component will get picked up, algorithmically pushed out there. And then you at the same time have the intimate side of things where word of mouth is going to play to your advantage in a way that music doesn't sort of use word of mouth or get the same boost from word of mouth, nor does video, because like it's more of a lean back experience now.
Yeah. Do you think people are watching full podcast episodes, like video versions of them? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, you have to always imagine in almost every context, like, there's another monitor, there's another screen, it's the TV over there, as opposed to I'm staring at this thing for 2 hours on YouTube.
Yeah.
There's this whole movement on Netflix where a lot of people are complaining. They say, why does everybody keep repeating stuff in all these Netflix shows? They'll like repeat the plot to you 4 times throughout the episode. And they're like, why is that happening? And the answer is because everybody's looking away. Nobody's actually watching the thing. It's always on in the background. And then they didn't hear what was happening. So if you don't keep repeating the plot, they forget it. Right? And so that's Netflix. That's as high quality video as
that's totally
ever going to exist.
The writers to say, like, once they show a beautiful sunrise, they go, what a beautiful sunrise here.
Yeah. You have to be able to consume the video as audio. YouTube Premium did that a long time ago, right? Like, you can shut off your phone and it'll keep playing the video in the background if you pay for YouTube Premium.
Oh, that's right.
So this whole premise of like, is it video first or audio first? It's more of it's just a different format of the same thing. But then if you shut your phone off and put it down, it's the same thing. You're just not looking at it. So I think, how much effort you need to put into video is a really good debate. Because like Oscar said, a lot of people I know just do the clips. And then they don't even post the video on YouTube for the algorithm. They just record the video, only make clips of the video, and let the audio be the source of truth.
And then the audio,
and they'll send everybody to Spotify from the clips.
Well, that's great, because I think discovery is, a challenge. And I think people who want to get into podcasting, they're like, how do I get successful? How does the economics work too as a creator? Like, who's making the most money off a podcast now? Is it the platforms? Is it the creators, the publishers? Like, who are the stakeholders here? I want to start a podcast. I want to grow it. I want to be able to sustain it, as a business. Who are the big winners here in podcasts?
It's a really interesting, kind of play in the medium as a whole. And the reason I say that is because for the first time, it's the publisher, not the platform, that matters. So, for example, here at iHeart, we always say, listen wherever you would like to consume your podcast, whether that is Spotify or Apple, etc. Because podcasting is an RSS feed, ultimately, the publisher controls the ad environment. that also can
Can you define publisher just so?
Yeah, so the publisher is the one that is actually that either owns the rights or is helping the creator produce the podcast.
Got it.
But basically has the publishing rights to it, can push it out to all of the other sources, wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It's good for creators too, because then you can negotiate a rev share deal with that publisher and you don't have to promote just Spotify or just Apple or just iHeartRadio or Pandora. It doesn't matter. You're going to be able to reach the listener regardless of the platform and have your advertisement land or your host read ad land on that platform.
Just so because we're just talking about it now, those dynamic ads, the ones that are not host reads that are kind of hard coded into the audio file, are those done on the platform end or on the publisher end?
Great question. So we do that actually at the publisher end.
Okay.
And so we've moved almost to dynamically inserted ads for that reason. It allows it to where you don't have to have an evergreen ad if you're listening, because we find most people discover a podcast. They then go back to season 1 and listen. You don't want to hear an ad that's 3 years old.
Like watch the Super Bowl
Exactly.
from 3 years ago.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. Wait, so then how does this work? So Spotify is running your ads?
Ultimately, yes. So when
and
you're
they're getting a piece of that, or
so when you are consuming a podcast that's owned by iHeart, published by iHeart on Spotify, that entire ad environment is coming from iHeart. And the same is in the reverse. If you're listening on iHeart to a Spotify ad, Spotify controls the ad environment on that side.
And why is Spotify allowing this to happen for people to publish on their platform and monetize 100% outside of they're getting a piece of it? That seems very unlike the video platforms.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's about how can they be a service and provide that for their listeners, their consumers, their subscribers, to discover new podcasts, to keep you from maybe going outside that platform, to others to consume, right? If we can keep you in the platform, make recommendations for other podcasts, then you're going to come and go back to our
right. Because ultimately you're going to be a subscriber. It's not really I guess the business model for Spotify isn't so heavily based on advertising. It's much more based on subscription. So they're allowing that pass through advertising because they just want you to be there and be incentivized to be there. I think that's
right.
Important. Yeah.
I think I can add 2 more perspectives, as it relates to who's making money, in podcasting as well. So I can speak first, maybe perhaps to the creator perspective. So prior to us launching Epidemic about 16 years ago, adding music to your content, whether it was a podcast or some other form of audiovisual content, was, to put it mildly, difficult. It was very litigious, extremely expensive, opaque. There was very little support to sort of do that in a fun, let alone collaborative way. And so the first thing that we tried to do is we changed that. We flipped it into a subscription and ultimately capped our sides to the benefit of the content creators and the publishers. And so I think that's one way to allow for content creators to make money by sort of identifying cost friction, taking it out and sort of scaling it and making it workable for the podcast creators. On the flip side, you need to take care of the artists because you want to make sure that people who provide music are fairly compensated as well. And this is where I think it gets truly innovative, because this is where we can start to stack different media channels on top of each other. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that everyone here is familiar with Stranger Things and Kate Bush sort of running up that hill.
Yeah.
So use video. Like that track exploded on Spotify because people consumed the content, like fell in love with it again, went back, listened, and then suddenly there's a like incredible royalty stream hitting Kate and her team. I think the same is now happening at scale as it relates to podcasts and other things. So at Epidemic, we soundtrack about 3 billion pieces of content every single day. So that's the equivalent of 20 Super Bowls every single day, 365 days a year. And a huge proportion of people who consume that music in the podcast that they love, with the shows that they love, have the similar reaction, which is, wow, this track is amazing. I love it. It's great. And so we can take the monetization out of podcasting such that the podcasters and the publishers keep that. We drive the affinity with the person consuming the podcast. They use a Shazam service or a link or something else, start listening to the music that we provided into that piece of content. That generates royalty, and we then monetize and share that with artists. So you tie podcast to video, to television, to other forms of content. So once you start seeing the matrix, there are many different avenues. You can pull them together in different ways. You can allow for different kinds of monetization across different platforms. And again, it's hopefully it sounds straightforward, simple. The difficult part is building the infrastructure and the legalities around that to make that happen and scale globally.
I mean, that's amazing. I feel like you just pulled the curtain back on how this all works together. I think for us indie podcasters, I don't know who's out here has a podcast, or anyone, raise your hand if you have a podcast or considering doing a podcast or it's associated with producing it. Okay. What is the real opportunity, or what's the path for an indie creator? Someone wants to start a podcast. They want to monetize. What are their options? Do they need it? Is an acquisition necessary? Can they stay independent? How does that work? I mean, this is an open question for anyone on the panel. I think I want to hear from you, Rox, a little bit, and also Jonathan from the other side. Like,
Yeah,
what's your opportunity here?
John can definitely speak better to this, but like it scales really fast, right? The cool thing about like dynamic ad insertion as we have it on audio is you can kind of start with that from almost day zero. Like you could get 1,000 listens and you can make $5 on just putting ads into your audio.
Without even having to go out and
right,
do
like,
an integration.
YouTube, Spotify, they'll say, hey, you need 1,000 watch hours, you need 4,000 subscribers, right? There are like kind of limits, it's a little bit gated. On podcasting, it's an MP3 file. Put whatever you want in there, and then platforms like me will literally put an ad in for you, right? Like John was saying earlier, I'm a publisher. So I can just say, hey, click turn on ads, decide where you want the ads.
How does that work with your app?
So the way dynamic ad insertion works in general is at a very, very high level. If you've ever put ads on a YouTube video, it's pretty much the same thing. You click, I want an ad here, I want an ad here, and then you either do one of two things. You say, put a random ad there. I don't care what it is. Pay me for it. So it'll be a random ad for a Honda Civic or some lawyer or something.
And they'll figure it out which best one.
I'll figure it out what the best one is, and then I'll put it in your thing specifically for that one guy listening that one time. Or it's host red, which means you say, buy Red Bull. And then you put that MP3 of you saying buy Red Bull in there, and then Red Bull pays you directly, and I have nothing to do with that. It's basically a sparkling sponsorship, and not much else. But you can make money really early on, especially if you're starting with audio where it's like much cheaper, or even if you're using something like Riverside to get started on video, which I would recommend if you came in on day one, just because then you get to be on YouTube and get the algorithm.
And clip it out for your promotion.
And do all the clipping, right? Like,
Riverside.fm.
Yeah, Riverside.fm. And the Opus Clip guys who are literally right next to the stage are also pretty good for spamming clips out to the internet, that are really solid for when you're getting started.
Yeah, Oscar.
So, I'll offer up one thought before Jonathan sort of hammers it home and the real expert here. One thing that I've always found to be super interesting is the following, and it's deeply unfair. I love video content, and I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. Putting together one episode, I'm guessing $20 million, $50 million, like a massive amount of money to make that come to fruition and come to life. However, when I've seen an episode once, even though I love Game of Thrones, I'm not going to see it again. I know the plot. I know how it ends. It's like, it's boring. You flip to the other side of the cultural stack and you go to music. To Rox's point, way cheaper to produce. I can be in front of my computer. I can create an epic piece of music. And then the deeply unfair part of it is the more I listen to that track, if I'm a consumer, if this is my jam and this is what I listen to when I run, I'm going to listen to that track infinitely, not just once, but like thousands of times. And the royalties just going to keep on accruing. So very expensive, you monetize once. Super cheap, you monetize infinitely. I think podcasting is interesting because it's in the middle, because yes, it's very cheap, but it tends to be more like you watch it once and then you know the outcome. You're not going to watch it again and again. So I think it's perfectly situated in the middle of these two extremes. And so I think that's why it's so interesting to try and figure out how do you best monetize this, because it's so dramatically different from these two other ways of sort of.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting too. And also, like you were saying earlier, podcasts are, they can be a little more timeless, right? You can listen to a podcast that's a little bit older. I mean, if it's not pop culture or something that's about high relevancy, you can hear something, especially if it's investigative, or I think that's why true crime does so well, because it's not about the now. I think from a creator's perspective, acquisition also seems like a big opportunity. I'm going to build up. I'll do my monetization, small potatoes, but the big exits are the ones that make headlines. Like where, Spotify is exclusively doing, Alex Earl podcast for absurd amounts of money. How realistic is that? How do I get into your network, and how helpful is that going to be for me in terms of my career as a podcaster?
Yeah, I really think the value that you're looking for as a creator in which publisher to go with is how are they going to promote my show? How are they going to drive additional downloads for me, which ultimately means more revenue for me? And that's one of the things even at iHeart, what we do is, depending upon who the creator is, we will work with them on not only do you have a amazing show that either thought of the idea of a show or a show that's already exists, is there an opportunity to create a slate of shows around that? So we do a lot of comedy slates. Will Ferrell is one of our partners. We created Big Money Players with him as an example. We do an entire slate of podcasts that are comedic. Same thing with true crime. We've been able to create those slates as well because we know that they're kind of a leapfrog. If someone's going to be a fan of this show, they're probably going to be a fan of the other, similar categories, ways that they do the storytelling. So we work with a lot of different creators to do that and also handle all of their sales efforts and monetization as a whole so that they don't have to worry about that their main goal is to create good storytelling, and then we will go promote it, drive listeners, and then help them monetize at the same time. So I always say if you're looking for someone, look for someone that is really going to invest the time to help promote the show. But most importantly, make your content available on as many platforms as possible.
That's incredible. We're at 30 minutes, so we're going to open it up to Q&A. Thank you very much for some very stimulating and interesting points.
Absolutely. And I'll be running mics. So who's got a question for this great team? I got one over there. All right. Running over here. Thank you for making.
Great job, gentlemen.
Hi, you guys. Good morning. Really great panel. Thank you. I live in Africa, and I've created a media company that is leveraging content creators and the incredible content coming out of Africa. I get the sense that there's potential for a podcast, but it's not been my jam. I've been much more focused on video. And I don't know what the situation is around podcasts within Africa, but I think there's an audience within Africa as well as within the diaspora community globally. So I'm just curious to know your thoughts about where to go to start and what your thoughts are about a podcast focused on African content creators, whether it's new musical artists, or just what is happening today in Africa, which is very compelling and which I want to share with the world.
I think I'll start there. I think the biggest thing, if you look at just the U.S. alone, podcasts are huge, right? 30% of our time every day is spent in audio of some form. With that said, outside the U.S., we're starting to see significant growth and adoption for podcasting, whether it's we just launched in the Middle East, we launched in Asia. So I think what I would do is look at downloads within the market, figure out where your greatest opportunity at a geography level, and then start the storytelling with that audience in mind. Without a doubt, though, we always see kind of the wave of media consumption happening across the world, starting in a lot of cases, media capital here in the U.S. I definitely think that storytelling is going to be big in that area. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were just saying is finding the right publishing company. There's one out there called Spreaker, which is an opportunity where you can upload your content, get it out, publish it. There's many others available as well. So I would start there.
I mean, I can only answer from a more pure music perspective. But I would say that there is a clear trend in terms of appetite for more regionally oriented content. I think from a music perspective, there's for the longest time ever, this was a Western, dare I say, North American source of origin. Like that's where all the interesting pop culture happened. And then for the last 10 years, it's been super clear that that's moved to South America. And so that's where all the interesting content has happened. I think now everyone is firmly focused on the MENA region, so Middle East, North Africa. And so I think that that's like the trend. That's how this is moving. And so I think that's one thing. And then in parallel, maybe the video component, I'll just say the word Squid Game. We've also gone from like content consumption being more focused on traditional Western culture to being more interesting coming from different parts of the world.
It's a great point.
My dialect gives me away. I'm a Swede. So like, crime noir and that kind of stuff is very popular all over the world. So I would argue like super relevant local content, but don't be surprised if there's massive global interest because people are curious. They're hungry for interesting stories.
Yeah. And I'd be careful about like kind of what John said. Who's your audience, right? And this is like first principles with any kind of content you make is who is this for and how should they feel? Like, why do they care, right? If like a lot of podcasts, like we were saying earlier, you kind of get this nice parasocial effect. You feel like you're hanging out with friends when you listen to a comedy podcast. You feel like you're a part of an interview when you're watching a business podcast. So is it news? Is it people who care about the politics of this country want to hear my take or want to hear what's going on? You know, like you really, I would spend time thinking about it before you go just jump right in. You can do a lot of great research on YouTube and see what things have views within the realm that you're considering and kind of land on like what's your unique angle, what's your unique take. And then that gives you a much higher chance of A, succeeding, and then B, knowing where to put your stuff and who to talk to and what Facebook groups and email lists you should be paying attention to.
Yeah. Any other questions out here? Got one right here.
Hey, it's not a question, but just a fact. The world, you know, with news consumption, you all don't need to be apologetic because audio is first and the future going forward will be audio. And the fact that radio is trusted and it's trusted by geography, it's trusted by who's coming, you know, over the channel. And so audio, really no need for apologies. You guys are first and you are the future.
I really appreciate that. We've seen how much politics has been driven by.
Yeah, no, that just
Getting
keeps speaking into the mics. No, sometimes the wired, it's because there's so much wired spectrum in here.
You know,
They're trying to silence you, Drew.
So much of,
they're trying to silence you, Drew.
So much of politics this last sort of go around has been driven by podcasts. They're being invited into the White House. And I think there's something about that intimacy we were talking about as well in terms of.
We have a question back here.
Oh, that one. Good. I'm looking at you, Rox.
There are truly hundreds. If you're starting from day 0, if you're not doing video, just use Spotify for creators. It's free. It's really good. It gets the job done. It'll take you 5 minutes to set up.
But you recommend video for all the reasons we spoke, right? Yeah,
I would recommend video, but again, if you're starting from 0, I'm going to assume you have $0. If you have $0, Spotify for creators, YouTube, you're fine. You don't need stuff like my thing until you're, you know, caring about saving the extra 20 minutes on the upload and getting all the fancy analytics. You don't need that complexity on day 1. Things like Riverside, I believe, have a free plan. Sorry if I'm wrong. They can't hear me. Yeah, and like you can start on a Zoom call, screen recording with OBS or literally anything, and it is fine. Rule number 1 of starting any kind of content is you have to just start. 95 or something % of podcasts die before 15 episodes. So try and get 15 episodes and then worry about getting more complicated.
That's great advice.
I'll take it one step further in terms of advice. I think that there's a huge drop-off problem within podcasting, as in, I think it's in part because people don't invest enough time in the initial part of the podcast to get people hooked. And that's in terms of storytelling, design, building the trust, like all of those components. But maybe also tying back to ads, it's like ad insertion. I'd love to hear your comments around this, Jonathan, in terms of, is that working perfectly? Or is it the case that sometimes there's a constant struggle trade-off between monetizing, making it work, and then allowing people to fall in love with the content and just consuming it non-stop, and sort of investing and also paying attention to the beginning?
It's a great question. We actually didn't hit on that earlier, but in choosing the publisher, you want to make sure that ad load is going to be fair to your show. If you were to just load it with a bunch of ads, you're probably going to drive away some listenership. Yeah, sure. So it's always about having the right healthy amount. And then also the ads themselves, making sure that they are true to your content or show and don't counter to anything that you might be saying. It has to sound organic.
It does sound like podcast listeners are more forgiving of ads, partially because of the fractured attention. Like you can kind of listen to an ad and still do your thing. But also I feel like people get this is how these things get funded. I think people are forgiving to that. Yeah.
One more quick question over here. I will also say Descript, DESCRIPT, for recording and editing can be really cheap and easy to use. I use it for my video. Quick question here. Thank you.
Great. Hey guys, thanks very much. I'm curious about your thoughts about AI-driven and synthetic voice-based podcasting. And, is that an emerging threat? Is it not a threat? And is this something you're seeing more of or not, or do you expect to?
I'll hit that because we are utilizing AI right now to test a few different things, whether we are taking our current library of content that we have to make it available in other languages very quickly across the globe. I think that if used the right way, it actually can be extremely helpful. We have also played with and tested just using AI created content and voices. It does not sound, in my opinion, the right way yet. Maybe it will in the future. But I still think that you're going to have direction given that creator is still going to have to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, I know at least one big creator that said, well, at some point, a podcast that is solo is just me talking. At some point, me talking is just me saying my words. At some point, that could just be AI coming off of a script I wrote, right? So they're messing around with it. Nothing too crazy. It still takes a lot of manual edits to get to a point that they're happy with. Do I think we're in danger? Not necessarily, but I'll say the same thing, we've all been saying about AI, that it just brings the barrier of entry down and brings the bar for quality up. There's just going to be a lot more stuff that's super okay. So you just won't get very far making super okay content anymore. You'll have to be pretty good.
And I think we're about done unless anybody has one last word on AI. Oscar, are you afraid of the big bad AI?
No. I think it's a great accelerant. I think to Rox's point, it's gonna push people to have more interesting stories to tell. Because I think at the end of the day, storytelling is about creating emotion, striking a chord, making people feel something. I think AI is going to take away a lot of those things that sort of can be better handled automatically, but that's going to free up time and opportunity for people to do things that really strike a chord and make human connection. So
I like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, give it up for Drew, Rox, Oscar, and Jonathan. Thank you guys.